and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes football webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Waljasper, along with Tribune football beat writer David Morrison. David, since last we met, Missouri won the Cotton Bowl to finish 12-2. So probably, by my estimation, you could argue that it's one of the three best seasons in Missouri football history in terms of what their final ranking it would be, and in terms of their wins, it is tied for first. Obviously, they play more games now than they did way back in the day, but a great season by any estimation for Missouri. Now, the threat of the Cotton Bowl seemed to be, as it was going on at least, was Gary Pinkel, why are you sticking with James Franklin? You're going to lose this game. Just your thoughts on that game as it was taking place. Did you think it's time to make a change, or did you think, he's James Franklin is your senior starter, you stick with him and let him win it or lose it for you?
I think it was the right choice to stay with him personally. And I think it was made even more the right choice by the fact that they put Matty Mock in for a series that they said was planned in the third quarter there, and he went 3 and out. I mean, like if Mock had gone in that series and led them to a touchdown or a field goal while Franklin was struggling so mightily, I might have had to rethink my priorities. But in the heat of the moment in that game, it's James Franklin's last game at Missouri. A last game of a pretty good Missouri career, all told, in his hometown of Dallas. I think it would have been kind of a devastating thing for him to be pulled from that game, especially when, Mock led a touchdown drive, but then he came back in and didn't lead another. He was doing about as, he wasn't turning the ball over like James Franklin was at that point. But I just think, Franklin earned it basically with what he went through the rest of his career. He earned the right to sink or swim, in that last game of his, and not to be replaced by the redshirt freshman there. And if you look at it, I mean, he did enough. He did what was needed of him down the stretch to win. I mean, he completed 5 of his last 8 passes for 81 yards. He threw that big one to Dorial Green-Beckham down the sideline to set up the Josey touchdown. So it ended up paying off in the end. And even if it didn't, I think it was the right choice, though, to kind of stick with the guy who got you there, really.
Well, I probably would have went the other way on that. It did work out for Gary Pinkel, and at the end, James did make that throw to Dorial Green-Beckham. That was kind of a big deal. I thought during that game, though, that it had gotten to the point where the only way I thought they were going to lose that game in the third quarter was if they started turning it over, which is what they did. Right. And then I was just not so sure about his personality in terms of bouncing back from that sort of thing. He's not someone who just has oozing natural confidence that, I screwed up then, but this time, right, yeah. He's a guy that can get down a little bit. And that seemed to be what was taking place. And I guess I don't view the quarterback position as so different from, a left guard that if you're hurting the team, then you go to the next one. So I probably would have made the switch, not immediately, but probably in the third quarter, but as it worked out fine. I think throughout the year, you could argue that Gary Pinkel probably, even though in any given game you might have said, you may be jeopardizing this game with how you're fiddling with these quarterbacks. In the end, it all worked out exactly as he might have envisioned, in that, early on, some of those early games in the season, they didn't blow people out, and he was kind of giving Matty Mock, a possession per game where you kind of wondered if, it's nice you're getting him ready for next year, but if you lose this game, you might not be here next year. Right. But it all worked out, and then he was kind of more ready to go when James got hurt. And then, that drive he led in the second quarter in the Cotton Bowl was big too. So yeah, it was. It worked. Afterwards, Kony Ealy, no surprise, announced that he was going to forego his senior year and go to the NFL. Henry Josey was a guy that we were less sure which way it was going to go with him. He also does. Those are the only 2 that decide they're going to leave early. Your thoughts on their decisions?
Well, yeah, like you said, Kony Ealy wasn't much of a surprise at all. It seemed like, especially as he started playing better and better at the end of the year, and that sort of production started meeting the potential everybody saw in him before the season, that he was going to go. And I mean, he should be a first-round pick easy. It seems like he seems like the guy that's just going to be impressive looking in workouts. He's huge, and he's pretty fleet for his size. He's not as quick as Michael Sam or Marcus Golden or guys like that, but he's pretty good pretty fast for a 275-pound guy. And he showed the versatility this year, playing inside, playing outside, and being able to do that at the next level. And he's just really good at getting his hands into passing lanes too. He's got kind of a knack for that, deflecting balls and stuff and being disruptive and stuff like that. So
and he was productive.
Yeah, and he was very productive, especially down the stretch. He was productive. So I mean, that wasn't a surprise, and that was a good decision for him. And he'll probably go in the first round. Josey, I'm a little bit on the fence about him because he said that his draft grade that he got from the evaluation board was 4th round or lower, which usually you see that and you say, maybe think about coming out next year, you can have better stock. But the thing about Josey is I don't know, when you kind of weigh the risk-reward analysis there, I don't know if you wanted to, chance another year in college and getting injured then and injuring his knee again and not getting the chance to go to the NFL against the possible reward of raising his stock, because I don't know how much more he could have raised his stock in a senior year at Missouri after he had already run for 1,107 or 66 yards and 16 touchdowns this year. So I mean, in the end, it'll probably turn out to be a good decision for him because I think he'll impress in workouts too. I think he can turn in a good 40 time, maybe show more versatility with his pass catching and returning games and kind of climb some boards. So, I mean, I think it's a good decision for Josey, too. It's just a little more iffy than Ealy's.
Yeah, with him, the one thing that would concern you would be that if, every time Henry Josey's name comes up, the second sentence is the word knee injury and how skittish that might make NFL scouts. So, if he'd come back and played 2 straight seasons with no problem, maybe, he wins them over. Maybe he's, maybe he regains that little bit of a burst that he had in 2011 that he maybe wasn't quite as fast this year, but incredibly productive in the SEC. The one thing I would say in favor of leaving, assuming he does get drafted and makes a team, I really think running backs, you have X number of hits you can take before you become incredibly ineffective. And it might happen when you're 25 or it might happen when you're 30, but you've only got so many and you might as well be taking those hits while you're getting paid for it. Exactly. So if he can get on a roster, whether he's drafted in the 1st round or the 7th round or as a free agent and can make a team, then it turns out to be the right decision in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, moving on. Our early guesses about what Missouri's strengths and weaknesses might be next year.
Well, I think they're still going to be pretty strong along the lines. It seems like they've got enough coming back on both the offensive and defensive lines next year to not take huge steps back in those departments. I mean, on the offensive line, you got Evan Boehm at the center and the entire right side coming back. Then you lose the entire left side. You lose Justin Britt, who, in my opinion, was the best offensive lineman out of that. And I don't think that's an unpopular opinion or anything. I think it's pretty well established that he was really important for that line. And then Max Copeland, who's a really good emotional guy for the line and stuff like that. So those
we
are
will dearly miss Max.
Yes, and dearly missed by beat writers. But
irreplaceable from our point of view.
But yeah, so those are 2 important guys you're losing from the left side of the line. But I mean, you have a guy like Anthony Gotti who got a little bit of experience over there this year. You got a guy like Mitch Hall, transfer from Ole Miss, who battled Copeland in the offseason for that left guard spot. And then you got a bunch of promising young guys like Clay Rhodes, Jordan Williams, guys like that who could plug into that left side of the line. And then on the defensive side, I mean, you lose Kony Ealy and Michael Sam, who are 2 of the most productive ends in the SEC this year. But then you've got backups Marcus Golden and Shane Ray, who were 2 of the most productive defensive ends in the SEC this year. So I'm not going to say there's not going to be a drop off because Ealy and Sam were so good, but the drop off won't be that drastic. And then you return everybody on the interior, Matt Hoke, Lucas Vincent, Harold Brantley, guys like that. So I mean, as far as strengths, I feel like the lines could be as good next year as they were this year.
Okay. And then I think, in the skill positions on offense, they have the potential to still be really good. Matty Mock is a guy that I think you would like to think could have the sort of better than what he had in terms of completion percentages, but to still be kind of that dynamic guy who can get out and scramble and take some chances and make some plays. Not sure yet what's going to go on behind him. If you just watched preseason practices, I thought Eddie Prince probably looked as good as Mock did in the preseason. Now they'll I guess you could call it a quarterback battle in the spring. I'm guessing it may be more like a battle for the backup job. But as we've seen, if you can get that backup job, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get to play next year. So it'll be interesting to see if Prince, if he's not going to beat out Matty Mock, which I tend to doubt is going to happen, can he beat out Trent Hosick and anyone else and become the backup? Who gets that job? And then at a wide receiver position, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but I think they still have some pretty good. Obviously, you have Dorial Green-Beckham, and then you have Bud Sasser, who was a guy who was a good, solid fourth option for him this year. I think they're always going to have some decent receivers. So I think they're solid. I just wonder a little bit about the depth on offense, but I think their frontline guys are pretty solid. I think their bigger concern probably next year might be in the secondary, where you lose E.J. Gaines. He's probably the toughest guy to replace on defense.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anybody behind him like those defensive ends or behind the guys you're losing at the defensive end spot.
I mean, the secondary would be a flashpoint for me too, especially because you're losing E.J. Gaines, Randy Ponder, and Matt White, a starting safety who started all 14 games this year. But the thing is, Arian Penton and John Gibson, they got a little bit of experience this year when Gaines was hurt. Ernest Payton, he's going to be coming back from that ACL injury, and he was expected to play a big role this year before he got hurt. So, I mean, they've got a little bit of experienced depth a little bit at the secondary. I'd be a little more worried about linebacker because you lose Andrew Wilson, who's your leading tackler the last 3 years. You lose Donovan Bonner, who is a senior, and he wasn't, I guess, technically a starter because they played the nickel so much, but he was their starter in their 3 linebacker sets. And then basically you've got Kentrell Brothers coming back, and then Darvin Ruiz, and those are basically the only 2 that have any collegiate playing experience coming back at linebackers.
Michael Scheer did play some on special teams, and there's
there's
some guys that played special teams.
Right, yeah, Scheer, Clarence Green, and Donovan Newsom all played on special teams and had a handful of snaps this year. But I mean, it's just, as far as getting knocking knees because of people who've never been in this situation before, linebacker could be a little dicey. But again, they've got a lot of options that they can evaluate before the season and see who kind of, I guess, comes out ahead.
All right, and then lastly, the major event of the last week was Dorial Green-Beckham getting arrested in Springfield. Apparently he was in a car where there was 1 pound of marijuana. So he was arrested on a felony, but no charges have been brought yet, and it may be a while, as you found out today, before any decisions are made on what the charges are going to be. So we're operating without really knowing the end of the criminal side of it, so it's hard to say what's going to happen. But just your thoughts on what kind of impact this might have on the rest of his Missouri career and his NFL career.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's so many questions about it right now. And if he's not charged with anything, and as long as he's not charged with anything, he'll still be a part of the team, and he'll still be able to do everything that any player on the team could do. But I mean, if he is charged with a felony, it's departmental policy that he's suspended from all team activities. And if he's convicted of said felony, he's off the team. But again, he hasn't been charged with anything. It's just all looks kind of bad for him. So not knowing anything more than that, and knowing that we might have 3 to 6 months to wait to find out anything more about this, but while they get the test or results back from the state lab and such like that, or stuff like that. I mean, I really don't know how this is going to turn out for him. You get the feeling that just from what his father has said in the media, his father has said he's very confident that they don't think any charges are going to be brought against Dorial, which would kind of be an odd thing to say if they weren't very confident. So, I mean, you get the sense that this might turn out okay for him, but it's still going to be a hit on his reputation. It's the second time in 15 months he's been caught in a car with marijuana, you know? So, I mean, if it doesn't sully kind of his name at the collegiate level, it might start, raising eyebrows of NFL teams about character issues and things like that, even if he's not charged and even if he comes out clean in this. Just the fact that he was in a car with a pound of marijuana might make some skeptics out of NFL people too. Yeah,
I tend to think that he'll be playing for Missouri next fall. I would be surprised if he weren't. The issue of the NFL, I don't think NFL people are going to look at him and say, we think he's got a serious drug problem and therefore we don't want to draft him, because I think they're smart enough to know that many, if not most, college football players smoke marijuana a lot. But I think what they will look at and say, even though we know many, if not most, college football players smoke marijuana a lot, they don't all get caught smoking marijuana a lot. And so guys who maybe get caught a lot for doing things in college might also get caught in the NFL. And if your guy is getting caught for drug issues, he's of no use to you because he can't play.
Right. Yeah.
I think that is the biggest issue for him, is the decisions he's making to putting himself in a car with that much marijuana, or to be smoking pot, in the parking lot by Furrow Field. these are kind of, kids make dumb decisions, but all that, and he's still a kid, but all the NFL has to go on is, okay, but he's only going to be 1 year older when we decide to draft him. So and they're going to be investing a lot of money, and they want the players they draft to be on the field. So I think that's the one area where it could hurt him. I mean, I don't think he's a bad kid or anything like that, but kind of the dumb decisions you make, dumb decisions we might make when we were in college wouldn't really affect that $20,000 a year job we got out of college. But if someone's going to be trying to invest, multiple millions of dollars in you, then it does play a role. So that's what he's up against, I think, win, lose, or draw in terms of the legal system. All right, well, we will be away from the football webcast for a while until probably spring practice, but keep checking back for us for basketball webcasts.